still a real concern.
Here's his problem is that he still wants it to be a lie, that like somehow, hey, this is what people bought into, so we have to adjust, but they still won't admit it's the truth, even though Terry McAuliffe's own words about parents not being able to be involved in their kids' education, or that it should be where school boards were flipped. And I say, congrats. We've been preaching that at the ACLJ for long.
One of the books that he was required to read, apparently, was a book called Courageous Conversations. Suggesting that whiteness is the real problem in the United States. So kids are, at the end of the day, a woman of vote for young people.
Take your calls on this at 1-800. Sure, the meltdown that we're starting to see is that, is there states. It's that kind of mindset in their states. We'll be right back on Secular.
In my time in, I watched the good work that the ACLJ was doing here in the States and all across the world.
The ACLJ's work at the UN, overseas with the is incredibly important.
We have on our team lawyers, non-lawyers as well, that are policy experts. They're all engaged in foreign policy issues.
We have been focused on Israel.
We actually try to go in and do something positive and actually affect change.
The risk of an incomplete or unsolid relationship within the United States of America and Israel is real.
Israel is very important to the ACLJ, and we will always fight for Israel's rights.
We had a series of cases at the European Court of Human Rights, primarily dealing with religious liberty.
And as Secretary of State, I saw this too. Nations that had more religious freedom were on firmer footing. They had
has always been religious liberties, in freedom of conscience and freedom of speech.
We've taken the First Amendment, and that has been our cornerstone. It's to defend the rights of people of faith and others that are having their rights abused.
We not only hold our government accountable, but we hold other governments accountable.
You have to keep the battle going when it's not cool anymore. Actually be committed to fighting it out.
Center on this, whether it is going after the deep state, whether it is litigation that we're engaged in. Your support of the ACLJ enables us to do all of this. Go to aclj.org today. That's
Secular. We're going to talk some in a bit too about that half hour. But hey, John, welcome to Secular. You're on the air.
Thank you. My point is, what have the Republicans learned? One was elected. All he's concerned about is his voting base. He has been concerned about doing things for his voting base as well as the House and the Senate. I think the Republicans need to learn this, and if they get back in power in the midterms, they need to, without apology, start taking care of their voting base.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, John, and I think you just have to. You have to. Let's take back the power while you still have a so you want your constituents to know, one, you're going to do what you can in a bipartisan function to do what's best for them, but that two, you're always going to fight for the causes that put you in that seat, and you've got to make it clear to your constituents back home. That's members have to do that. Good candidates, because you had good. Not, it wasn't just Youngkin. It was Sears. It was Mayaris. It was, you had this great group at the top. Mattered. Good candidates can affect the outcome of an election.
Yeah, you need to run candidates that reflect the population and the concerns of the voter base, and I think they did that up and down the ticket in Virginia, and quite frankly, they did it in New Jersey as well. And look, we figures inside the party very effectively. President Trump did a teletown hall and spoke to voters, again, mostly in Western Virginia. But he didn't come and do a big rally in the suburban area where maybe Glenn Youngkin wanted to speak more directly to parents. And he just utilized people in the correct way. I thought it was very professional. I thought it was very smart. And again, I think the biggest key here was he listened to voters inside the state and then spoke to the issues that While I agree with him that Republicans need to fly bold colors when they come and legislate, and they need to try to accomplish real things, Jordan, that needs to mean taking the victories that are available to them. Everything you want. And I look again to the Democrats for an example here. They could have passed this bipartisan infrastructure bill with Republican votes a long time ago, and at least showed their voters some progress. But
he acted kind of like we all did. That's got to be garbage, right? We can't be doing that. It would incentivize more people to come juice. We're going to continue to take your calls at 1-800-684-3110. Support our work. At aclj.org. Double the impact your donation. We'll be
going after the deep state, whether it is litigation that we're engaged in, it's training lawyers to fight for religious liberty, not just here in the United States. Thousands of radio do all of this. Production and other things that we are working on. We get a matching gift for. Go to AC.
Informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Seculo. And now your host, Jordan Seculo.
Oh, welcome back to Seculo. We are going to take your phone calls to 1-800-684-3110. So we're still talking about some of the Democrat fallout. And obviously we're going to focus in to the legislation they've been trying to pass. Maybe we'll vote on it now. Maybe we're going to vote on it today. What is... He's back. More progressive. House, which is a huge question. Then he gets to the Senate. He said, well, I want Congressional Budget Office scoring. When they find out what's in it, they're going to like it. That was the same day they wanted to vote on it. Issues that people care about. Following this disaster of trying to put forward both a bipartisan infrastructure bill and then the more partisan reconciliation bill. Take a listen, by 20.
If you don't take in consideration what people are going through at the gas pumps and at the grocery stores, the inflation that's coming, at first we thought it was transitory. If you recall,
that's got to hurt the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, the Schumers of the world, and the Biden team.
Well, it kills the bill. I mean, if Joe Manchin means that, and Jordan, that's always a hedge with Joe Manchin because he does change his mind an awful lot. But if he's not going to support the social spending bill, the reconciliation bill, then it's dead because they need every single Democrat in the United States Senate to vote for it in order to pass it. But Jordan, as I just kind of look through some of the mechanics that are happening, literally, Clyburn keeps the whip count. And so then James Clyburn was asked whether or not he had I don't make the decision. Will say this when the bill gets put. So, Jordan, what that tells me is neither one over to the Senate. But as you point out, even if they do, it's pretty clear that Joe Manchin wants a pause on that. And so
that what people are concerned about the inflation, the shelves being empty, will there be, even if you are in a decent economic situation, will the toys be there to buy or the presents and gifts be there to buy for Christmas?
So, particularly with fuel, and then you accompany that with what? Costco, many
Last night was the beginning of that pushback, and I think it's going to continue. And you ask about the agenda here. It's are governing like they have a mandate to radically remake the country. It's build back socialism. 3.5 trillion. They want to take control.
Speaker Pelosi stuff done. Youngkin would have lost McCullough. The more moderate folks in the House are going to say, "Wait a second, we just."
Talking about major tax overhaul reform. We're talking about changing our energy policies. We're talking about a whole social rearrangement. We're talking about $29 trillion of debt. We better get our hands around it and
The President Biden won your seat by 16 points.
Conference. So is this vote coming? Is it happening? Where are we? Take a listen to Bite 35.
Well, I was really very unhappy about not passing the BIF last week. I really was very unhappy because we had an October 31st deadline, and I thought that eloquent, but not enough, I guess. So now we're going to pass both bills, but in order to do so, we have to have votes for both bills, and that's where we are.
I mean, Harry, it does not. Yes, you do have to have the votes for those bills. And that's where we are. I think where she's saying is we don't have the votes. I think that's what I'm reading in there. Is she's pretty upset to the point where she can't find her words. This is not the usual strong Nancy Pelosi that we see kind of come out and say this is what's going to happen. We're going to have the vote today and then kind of push through. What Thad was talking about before, we were talking about it earlier. No one wants to say if they've got the votes or not, but it's clear from Clyburn and others too they don't have the votes yet.
I think that's true. And I listened to Nancy Pelosi this morning, and for about 15 or 20 seconds, she was virtually speechless. And then she followed her speechlessness by incoherence. So I by her own caucus. She progressives on other, but I think the Democrats' problem tends to be far larger than that because the Democrats are really triangulated because there are many Democrats in the House who want to eliminate the restrictions on state and local tax deductions. And Bernie Sanders in the Senate opposes that. And I think then they also have to deal with the moderate faction led by Joe Manchin. So I don't know where the Democrats are going, and I'm not sure they know either.
Yeah, so Thad, we're going to watch this very closely because we know on the floor, though, that are going to fail, unless she has to, unless she feels like I've got to let this vote move forward and let her fellow Democrats vote it down if that's the case. That's not usually her strategy or her style.
Bill on the floor of the House. And because she's like that was something that was tying her hands. Jordan, that was a self-imposed deadline, and I think it was the fourth one that she set. I mean, there was a deadline in August after the Senate passed it. There was one in September. There were a couple in October. Now we're into November. Jordan, they had the votes to pass the bill that she's talking about in that clip, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. She let it get tied to the larger social spending package by progressives, and she said it right in that clip. She said, now we have to pass both bills in order to have a chance at passing either. She's the one that tied these together, Jordan. She's the one that made it so she only has to pass both of these with votes in her own caucus. Look, she's right. They would have been better off had they passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill before the elections in Virginia. Maybe it would have made a difference. But look, she could still do this. She could still tell progressives, look, I don't have the vote for the larger bill. We're not going to vote on that today. In fact, we're not going to vote on it at all unless we get more votes on it. We're only going to vote on the bill that has bipartisan votes. Jordan, the fact that she's not doing that tells me that she's caved to the progressives, and it absolutely confirms what you just said. She doesn't have the votes on that larger bill.
No, I mean, this to me, it gets to the elections, it gets to what is all happening. This can quickly unravel for Democrats. I mean, you don't want to, again, you don't. Of not having done this and then Tuesday elections. You know, first it was we want to get these votes done before the president goes overseas. Then it was, now it is, hey, you didn't get this done before an election. You just got, your hand handed to you. Your head handed to you.
Getting the job. Election is different. As you know, I was former party chair, and I always know, let's look down into the numbers and see what it is. But I do think as the American people learn more about what we are doing in this legislation for families, very positive. You can't deny that it would be very positive.
She keeps going back to this idea of learning more about what's in the legislation. It's been kind of sitting out there. The fact is, the more people learn about it, the more they don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, she's wrong on this, Jordan. The American people, the voters, absolutely hate this law. Trillion, or it's going to be $5 said that they do not like. They could have showed. The truth is that they didn't have anything to show, Jordan, and even their voters that voted for President Biden just a year ago, so she says that she wants to learn from her voters. They spoke pretty loud and clear, but in order to learn, you actually have to absorb that data and then make an adjustment. She's not making an adjustment. She's just trying to shove it down their throats.
Yeah, I mean, this again, to me, folks, it is the classic Pelosi to say, once people find out about all this, they'll like it. I mean, I think what she's really saying is once we start handing out money, once people start getting used to another government program, yeah, it's always get rid of it. People will always want to utilize this. So, again, I think that's kind of where we are legislatively. You've got a big slowdown push by Joe Manchin when it comes to all of this. I mean, he's saying, listen, even if it gets to the U.S. Senate, we're going to have to take our time. $450,000. We all have to pay attention now even more closely to, because President Biden has opened the door to really flooding the DOJ with comment and what it was about.
About the way forward, Mr. President. There were reports that were surfacing that your administration is planning to pay illegal immigrants who are separated from their families at the border up to $450,000 each, possibly $1 million per family. Do you think that that might incentivize more people to come over illegally?
If you guys keep sending that garbage out, yeah, but it's not true.
So this is a garbage report.
Yeah.
Okay. So
450,000.
There it is. It looks like he had no one had told him about this, or he had been briefed on it. But the ACLU quick to throw the president under the bus.
And he deserves to be thrown under the bus if he doesn't understand what's actually going on in the Justice Department, particularly on a decision that is as important as this. He says pain is that it should not be done, but that is precisely what is being negotiated, I believe, as we speak, because the ACLU basically has suggested that they are continuing to negotiate. Perhaps message down to some of his staffers. But lastly, I would point out that President Biden's failure to take charge of this situation, at least so far, suggests that he has never been in charge.
So, I mean, I think that Harry is right. I think that this idea that the president, when he's pushed on these questions that are very specific, that have been out in the news, we've been talking about it. Fox, ACLU saying it was real. They learned there two things. One, two, the president realizes, like us, it's not a partisan issue to realize that if you did something like this, you were going to encourage a lot more illegal immigration. He says talking about it is garbage, but the ACLU says no, unless who represents that too. If you have calls about that, 1-800. The president, the ACLU on this. I do think though that the president, like every other American who hears that, says, you are going to incentivize more illegal activity. So that sounds absurd. No, we're definitely not going to do that. I can't believe you're putting this garbage out there. But then you've got to go to the ACLU. They should be able to figure this out with the White House. And they say, no, the president's wrong. So I don't trust either of them until we have a final response from the Department of Justice and the actual people running the government. Because as Harry said, unless the president just instructed his Department of Justice on what to do, which, by the way, I don't think they'll take that as an instruction, we can still win this issue.
Jay, we have had many victories.
The report is groups.
It was something that no one could believe our government. They were admitting it.
It's one of the most significant wins in the ACLJ's history. To take on the IRS and win.
Fighting for the
that the courts will give us good rulings that are based in law and sound reasoning.
This is one of the social issues we're winning.
There are historians that point out that level since the first 3 centuries when the Roman Empire led religious persecution.
To bring him home.
We are getting my husband after 7.5 months.
Walk down the stairs of the plane. I was filled with emotion. The American people never forgot about him.
doubled.
Welcome back to Secular. Again, we have some issues with our phone lines, have some issues with online, but we're not having issues with broadcasting out and getting the message out. Be clear about a little bit more about the election because we're starting to see more and more of the ramifications. I'm going to go to Than Bit on this. Than, I don't think the ramifications, like the infrastructure bill, like the reconciliation, it all is kind of up in the air right now because they are putting their finger to the wind and saying, you know what, wrong message.
Yeah, Jordan, I think the impact will continue to be felt for a long time. The impact is going to be bigger if there's no pivot. I mean, there are a lot of the second half of Bill. I don't know if I'd use the word conservative. The message of the voters, but again, it's going. The best candidates, who builds the biggest tent, who reaches out to all portions of the coalition that's inside your party. And Jordan, I would just reiterate this too. I mean, both chambers literally hang by a thread. We talked about earlier in the broadcast how Democrats can only afford to lose 3 votes on a given measure right now. There is one vacancy, so that might go up by 1 before the next elections, but it only takes a handful of flips for the House of single flip in the United States Senate for control of that chamber to change. And so, look, I think the message of Virginia and New Jersey, even if it's not being heard by people in Washington, D.C., Jordan, I guarantee you it's being heard by voters all across the country.
Yeah, I mean, Harry, to me, too, it kind of settles what it means as people woke up on Wednesday to find this out, but how not just the gubernatorial race, but the fact that the president of the Senate there taken out by someone who had never run for office before, happens to be a truck driver, didn't spend much money on his campaign, who's been there for 20 years by like 5 or 6 points or more. These are those moments that if you look to as a conservative, you want to say, okay, let's see who are these, like the messaging, what were power from that's either been given.
Sorry, Tuesday was a wake-up call to anyone who had the plausibility of being awakened. So beyond the highlight elections, the Virginia election, for instance, it's important to note that down-ballot elections are also important. So in Seattle, a left-wing prosecutor was ousted. In Minneapolis, movement. If you look at state houses, many state legislatures turned from blue to red. And so I think there is a widespread, yet prefer to remain asleep at the switch. And in my view, I continue to hope that they remain asleep, because I think at the end of the day, that will awaken the American people movement, which takes over down the road.
Hey, Mark's calling from Colorado on line 1. Hey, Mark, welcome to Secular. You're on the air.
Hi. I was wondering about the mechanics of how the executive branch can dole out, $450,000 to illegal aliens. I thought Congress was in charge of the purse strings. So,
Congress created a judgment many years ago, and that judgment fund is what is utilized when they believe there's wrongdoing. And sometimes there's wrongdoing. It's usually very difficult to get a dime from the federal government. It's not impossible. But there's a lot of sovereign immunity. There's a lot of issues you have to get through. But if you're in a negotiation, which is what the ACLU is doing with the Department of Justice, on not going to trial, but instead negotiating a sum, a judgment for and a payment instead to settle it out of court. They actually were authorized by Congress. Their policy. The president, he agrees with us. It's bad policy.
Right. It's a policy, which means it's a choice, Jordan. I mean, it's not like a judge would be forcing them to do this. It would still be a proactive decision by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and then prosecutors down the line to reach settlement in a case. Congress authorized them to do that, just like you said, so they could do it, but it would still be a choice. I want to be very clear about that. But here's the thing that I really take away from it, Jordan. I mean, the president of the United States is the boss, or at least he's supposed to be. So if President Biden recognizes that this is a terrible idea and that it would, in fact, incentivize a tremendous make that clear to the people that work for him. Like Harry said, he needs to make that clear to the Attorney General. The Attorney General, Jordan, might have the congressional authority to make settlements, but if the President of the United States, the boss, says this would be horrible policy, this would be a terrible idea, and you will not do it, guess what? So while they're it, not a mandate from a judge, and the president ought to just tell the Attorney General, you heard what I said, now go execute the order.
I mean, it's called garbage by Harry, by President Biden. So one thing I think we can agree on with him, I wish he was a little bit more engaged because it would have gotten to this point, but this is his moment for his White House to pick up the phone and call DOJ to say, hey, this is wrong, we're not doing this.
I think that's absolutely correct. And so he could have a direct conversation with the Attorney General or have his chief of staff make a phone call. Secondly, though, I would point out that what is truly incentivizing our border crisis is, in fact, the Biden administration's open border policy. They have basically reversed all of the policies of the prior administration that were working. So to the extent that we have a problem with illegals in this country, that is Biden's problem. And he cannot escape responsibility for it. I think the policy was basically wrong at the start. It was illogical. And the Biden administration continues, however, to double down on opening the border to illegals. Basically, if you follow the Biden administration, if you're a citizen of Mexico and you wish to enter the United States, you have to an illegal, you can walk across the border.
Then just quickly, these votes, it's like it doesn't seem like they've got the votes, but it does seem like they have trouble in the Senate. But again, I put nothing past Joe Manchin to change his mind on that either.
Is she trying to issue a same-day rule to consider the reconciliation package? So I don't necessarily trust her, Jordan, but we've got to believe that she's trying. And then on the bipartisan infrastructure package, which is tied to it, remember, the Senate already passed that in a bipartisan fashion in August. So if she were to put that up, it would go straight to the president for his signature. So I think it's an any-moment exercise if she can find the votes.
All right, folks, we're going to stay up to speed on everything. Of course, we encourage you to support our work. If you can financially, this is a great time to do it. You can double the impact of your donation at aclj.org. Be part of our matching challenge for the month of November. That's aclj.org. Talk to you.